Clara Bennett had learned to read bad news before she opened it. It was in the weight of the envelope, the return address stamped too neatly, the way her hands went cold before her mind caught up. This one was heavier than most. She stood in the hallway of Bennett's sound studio, her brother's studio, the one he'd built with borrowed money and stubborn hope, and she read the words twice, because the first time, she refused to believe them. Notice of foreclosure. 30 days to cure or vacate. Behind her, 8-year-old Milo sat on the studio floor, headphones too big for his ears, drumming his fingers on his knees to a song only he could hear. He didn't look up. He didn't know yet that the walls around him were already halfway sold. Clara folded the letter before he could see her hands shake. Her brother Daniel had died 14 months ago, and in the wreckage he left behind, grief, a mortgage, a son who still expected him to walk through the door. Clara had found exactly one lifeline. A composer's residency grant, prestigious enough to matter, generous enough to save the studio if she won it. 30 days of mentorship, ending in a live showcase in front of investors who funded exactly this kind of impossible rescue. She had already applied. She had already been accepted. What she hadn't expected was the name on the assignment letter. Clara Bennett, the woman at the registration desk said the next morning, scanning a clipboard without looking up. You're paired with our senior mentor for the lakeside residency. He'll be reviewing your work daily until the showcase. That's sooner than I thought. Who's the mentor? The woman turned the clipboard around. Clara's eyes found the name before the woman could say it out loud, and something in her chest went very still. Nathan Cole. Cole, Clara said carefully, like the word might detonate if she said it wrong. As in Walter Cole? The woman blinked unbothered. His son, I believe. Is that a problem? Clara didn't answer fast enough, because across the lobby, a man had already turned at the sound of his own father's name. Tall, composed, dressed like someone who had learned early to keep his face unreadable, except for the flicker that crossed it now, quick and involuntary, gone almost before it arrived. He walked over anyway. That was the first thing she noticed about him, that he didn't look away, even when looking away would have been easier. Nathan Cole, he said, offering a hand she didn't take. I take it you know my father's name. Everyone from Millbrook knows your father's name. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. He's the reason my brother's studio is 30 days from being sold out from under his son. Something moved behind Nathan's eyes, not surprise. Recognition. Like he'd been waiting for years for someone to finally say it to his face. I know what you're thinking, he said quietly. Do you? You think I'm here to make this easier for my family's conscience? Some kind of quiet apology, dressed up as a grant program. He held her gaze, and for a moment the lobby noise seemed to fall away entirely. I'm not him. I need you to know that before we start, because you're not going to believe anything else I say until you do. Clara almost laughed, the kind of laugh that isn't about anything funny. You don't get to decide what I believe, Mr. Cole. You get 30 days to help me win a grant. That's all this is. That's all this is, he agreed. Too quickly. Like a man convincing himself before he'd finished convincing her. She turned to leave, and that was when she saw it. Milo, hovering by the studio door with his backpack still on, staring at Nathan with the open, unguarded curiosity only children have left in them. Is that your dad? Milo asked, pointing at nothing, at everything, at the space between two adults who'd just met and already knew too much about each other. No, Clara said, too fast. Nathan crouched slightly, meeting Milo at eye level, careful, deliberate. I'm going to be helping your aunt with some music for a few weeks. That's all. Milo studied him with the particular seriousness of an 8-year-old deciding whether an adult could be trusted. My dad used to say a good melody needs one thing nobody talks about. What's that? Nathan asked, and Clara noticed. She'd remember this later, turn it over more than once. That he actually wanted to know. Silence, Milo said. Between the notes. That's where the song lives. Nathan didn't say anything for a moment. Something in his jaw tightened, the way a man's does when a child says something too true by accident. Your dad sounds like he knew what he was talking about, he said finally. He did, Milo said simply, and walked back into the studio like the conversation had cost him nothing at all. Clara watched Nathan watch the boy go, and for one unguarded second, she saw something on his face she wasn't ready to name. Not guilt. Something closer to hunger, for a version of family he clearly didn't think he was allowed to want. He caught her looking. The wall came back up instantly. 30 days, he said, all business again, stepping back. Lakeside residency starts Monday. Bring everything you have. We're going to need all of it. And if I can't stand being in a room with you for 30 days? Then we'll have 30 days to prove you're wrong about that too. A pause. About both things. He walked away before she could ask what the second thing was. Clara stood in the lobby a long moment, the foreclosure letter still folded in her coat pocket, her nephew's small voice still in her ears. Silence between the notes. That's where the song lives, and understood, with a dread that felt uncomfortably close to something else entirely, that the next 30 days were going to cost her far more than a studio. The lake house sat at the end of a gravel road, all glass and cedar, the kind of quiet Clara wasn't used to anymore. She'd expected a rehearsal hall. Instead, she found a converted boathouse turned studio, a wall of windows facing still water, and Nathan Cole already at the piano, sleeves rolled, like he'd been there since dawn deciding how to survive the next 30 days. You're early, she said. I'm always early. It's easier to control a room before anyone else is in it. Is that a warning? It's an observation about myself. Take it however you need to. Clara set her case down harder than necessary. Milo trailed in behind her, backpack bouncing, already scanning the room the way children scan any new place, for the best hiding spot, the best window seat, the fastest way to belong. Rules, Nathan said, standing. The program requires I sign off on your progress weekly. That means I hear everything you write, unfinished or not. I'm not here to be gentle with it. Good. I didn't come here for gentle. You came here for 30 days and a check with enough zeros to save a building. His voice wasn't cruel, just precise, like a man who'd learned that softness got mistaken for weakness in his family and stopped risking it. Let's not pretend it's more complicated than that. It became complicated the second I found out your last name. That landed somewhere. She watched him absorb it, jaw tight, and for a moment he looked less like a mentor assigned to judge her and more like a man bracing for a verdict he'd already given himself 100 times. My father cost your brother his business, Nathan said quietly. I've read the file. I know what happened to the original studio financing, what he signed, who he sided with when it mattered. I'm not going to insult you by defending him. Then why are you here? Because I asked to be. He said it like a confession he hadn't planned on making yet. When I saw your name on the applicant list, I requested this assignment myself. I could have let someone else take it. Believe that or don't. Clara didn't know what to do with that, so she didn't do anything with it. She sat at the piano bench instead, put her hands on the keys, and let the silence answer for her. Milo wandered the room, running a hand along the window, then stopped at a shelf of old vinyl records stacked against the wall. Whose are these? My mother's, Nathan said. She used to play here before she passed. My father bought the lake house for her, actually. It's the one decent thing I can say about him without lying. Milo pulled one from the stack, studying the cover with the same seriousness he studied everything. My dad had one just like this. Same singer. Something flickered across Nathan's face. Surprise, maybe recognition, maybe the particular ache of finding a stranger's grief shaped exactly like your own. Small world, he said, and it came out rougher than he meant it to. They worked through the afternoon in careful, clipped exchanges, Clara playing fragments of the composition she'd started for Daniel, Nathan listening with his eyes closed, correcting a phrase here, pushing her to hold a note longer there, never once softening his notes into compliments she hadn't earned. That bar, he said, stopping her mid-phrase. You're rushing it. Why? Because if I sit in it too long, I have to feel it. He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice had lost its edge entirely. Then sit in it. The showcase doesn't need a technically perfect piece. It needs one that costs you something to play. That's what investors actually respond to, not skill. Honesty, they can't look away from. That sounds like advice from someone who doesn't take it himself. It is, he admitted and looked, for just a second, like a man who'd surprised himself by saying so. By evening, Milo had fallen asleep on the studio couch, headphones slipping off one ear, the old record spinning silently on its own because no one had thought to turn off the player. Clara covered him with her coat and stood at the window instead of leaving, watching the lake go the color of the sky. Nathan came to stand near her. Not too close, the careful distance of a man who'd learned exactly how much space was safe. He asked me at lunch if I had a dad, he said. I told him I did, but that we don't talk much. He said that was okay. Said his aunt taught him a person can miss someone and still be angry at them at the same time. Clara's throat tightened. That's something Daniel used to say to him. About our parents. He's a good kid. He's the only reason any of this matters, she said, and it came out sharper than she meant, a warning wrapped inside a truth. 30 days, a showcase, a check. None of it means anything if it doesn't end with him staying in the only home he has left. I know what's at stake, Clara. It was the first time he'd used her name. It sat strangely warm in the cold room. I didn't take this assignment to feel better about my father. I took it because I read your brother's file, and I read what happened to him, and I couldn't stop thinking that somebody should have stopped it before it got that far. I couldn't stop it 4 years ago. I can help stop it now. That's not the same thing as making it right. No, he agreed. It's not. I'm not asking you to think it is. They stood there a while longer, the lake dark now, Milo's soft breathing the only sound besides the faint hiss of a record with nowhere left to go. Clara didn't move away from him, and she noticed, distantly, that she hadn't wanted to. 30 days, she said finally, testing the words like a boundary she needed to say out loud to believe. Professional. That's all this is going to be. That's all this is going to be, Nathan echoed, and this time, the words sounded even less convincing than they had the first time he'd said them. Part 3. 30 days. The program director's email arrived on the 4th morning, and Clara read it twice standing barefoot in the boathouse kitchen, coffee going cold in her hand. Showcase date confirmed. 26 days from today. Investors attending include 3 foundations with direct interest in independent studio preservation. Final piece must be submitted for rehearsal review 1 week prior. 26 days. Not 30. Somewhere between the foreclosure letter and the lake house, for days had already disappeared, and Clara hadn't even noticed them going. They moved the date up, she said, when Nathan came in, already dressed, already unreadable in that careful way of his. I know. I got the same email. He poured his own coffee, watching her over the rim of the cup. That's not the part that should worry you. Then what is? You've written 11 bars in 4 days. A finished piece for the showcase needs at minimum 120. At this pace, we don't have a shortage of time. We have a shortage of you actually finishing something you're afraid to feel. Clara set the mug down harder than she meant to. That's not fair. It's not supposed to be fair. It's supposed to be true. He wasn't unkind, exactly. Just relentlessly precise, a man who'd apparently decided a long time ago that precision was the only form of honesty he trusted himself with. You keep starting the same phrase and stopping right before it turns into something real. I've watched you do it 9 times this week. Maybe I'm still figuring out where it goes. Or maybe you know exactly where it goes, and you don't want to go there while I'm in the room. She didn't answer that because he wasn't wrong and they both knew it. They worked instead. Days folded into each other. Milo doing schoolwork at the kitchen table between sessions, Clara at the piano hour after hour, Nathan beside her correcting timing, pushing a phrase toward its own honesty, refusing every time she reached for something easier than what the piece actually wanted to say. On the 9th day, something shifted without either of them naming it. Clara played a bridge she'd been avoiding, the part written for the year her parents died, the part Daniel had once called the truest thing she'd ever composed, and this time she let it run all the way through instead of cutting it short. When she finished, Nathan didn't say anything for a long moment. He just sat very still, hands on his knees, looking at the piano like it had told him something he wasn't supposed to overhear. That's it, he said finally, quiet. That's the piece. Everything before this was you protecting yourself from writing that. Now you just have to be brave enough to keep going. You sound like you know something about protecting yourself from things. I invented the concept. A small, unguarded almost smile, rare enough that Clara noticed it the way you notice weather changing. My family didn't really do feelings. We did results. Feelings were something that happened to other people, preferably quietly, and preferably somewhere my father couldn't see. And you? What do you do with them? I mentor other people's, he said. It's safer that way. I get to stand close enough to something honest, without it being mine. Clara turned on the bench to face him fully. That sounds lonely. It's efficient. But something in his voice cracked at the edges when he said it. Just slightly, like a man reciting a rule he no longer fully believed. They kept working past dark that night, the two of them alone at the piano after Milo had gone to bed, close enough that Clara could feel the warmth coming off him, close enough that neither of them commented on how they drifted nearer over the last 2 hours without either one choosing to. Try it here, he said, reaching past her to mark a measure, his hand briefly covering hers on the keys. Neither of them moved for a second longer than the correction required. Sorry, he said, pulling back like he'd touched something hot. You don't have to apologize for showing me where a note goes. That's not what I'm apologizing for. The room went very quiet. Outside, the lake made its small, patient sounds against the dock, and Clara found herself looking at him the way she hadn't let herself look at anyone in a long time. Not as Walter Cole's son, not as a program mentor with a checklist, but as a man who'd spent the last 9 days handing her back pieces of herself she hadn't known she'd buried. Nathan. His name felt different in her mouth than it had 4 days ago. What are we doing? Finishing a composition, he said, but it came out rougher than the words deserved, and they both heard the lie sitting inside it. That's not what I asked. He looked at her for a long moment, something raw moving behind his eyes, some old argument he seemed to be losing to himself in real time. I don't know, he admitted finally. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm supposed to be your mentor for 22 more days, get you to the showcase, and go back to a life where I don't think about you at all afterward. That was the plan. Is, he corrected, too fast, standing up from the bench like putting distance between them might undo the last 4 minutes. Is the plan. We should stop for tonight. Clara let him go without arguing, watching his back as he crossed the room, and sat alone at the piano a long while after, replaying the bridge she'd finally let herself write, feeling something in her chest that had nothing to do with the foreclosure letter still folded in her coat pocket, and everything to do with the man who'd just walked away from her faster than the moment required. 22 days left. She had started counting something other than the deadline now, and she didn't entirely know when that had happened either. It started with a fishing rod that didn't belong to anyone in particular. Nathan found it leaning against a boathouse wall, forgotten by some previous guest, and on a morning when Clara had locked herself in with the score and asked for an hour of nobody talking to her, he took Milo down to the dock instead of letting the boy wander bored through an empty house. You don't have to babysit me, Milo said, with the particular dignity of an 8-year-old who has decided he is mostly grown. I'm not babysitting. I'm terrible at fishing, and I need a second opinion on whether that's actually a fish or just a very committed piece of seaweed. Milo laughed before he could stop himself, and something in Nathan's chest loosened at the sound, unfamiliar and unwelcome, and impossible to send away once it arrived. They stayed out there for 2 hours. Nathan learned that Milo's father used to take him fishing on a lake much smaller than this one, that Milo remembered the smell of sunscreen more clearly than he remembered his father's voice now, and that this fact bothered him more than he wanted Clara to know, because he was afraid it meant he was starting to forget on purpose. I don't think that's true, Nathan said carefully. I think memories just change shape. The important ones don't leave. They just stop being the first thing you reach for, because you're not reaching for them out of panic anymore. Is that what happened to you? With your mom? Nathan hadn't expected the question to land so precisely. Something like that, he admitted. I still remember her playing piano before I remember her voice clearly.
I used to feel guilty about that.
I don't anymore. Milo considered this with his whole small, serious face, the way he considered everything that mattered. Okay, he said, like a verdict had been reached, and went back to watching his line for movement. Clara found them like that an hour later. Nathan crouched at the boy's side, patiently untangling a snagged line, Milo leaning into his shoulder without seeming to notice he was doing it, the two of them talking in the easy, unbothered rhythm of people who had quietly decided to trust each other. She stood at the top of the dock steps for a long moment before either of them saw her, and felt something crack open in her chest that she didn't have a name for yet. Not jealousy, not quite fear, something closer to a warning she didn't want to hear. "There you are," she said, too brightly, and both of them looked up at the same time, caught. That night, after Milo had gone to bed with sunburned shoulders and a story about a fish that had definitely been this big, Clara found Nathan on the porch, staring at the lake like it owed him an answer. "He likes you," she said. It wasn't an accusation. It came out more like a confession. "I like him too." Nathan didn't turn around. "That's the problem." "How is that a problem?" "Because in 22 days the showcase happens, the grant gets decided, and I go back to my life, whatever that means, and he's going to be a kid who spent a month thinking he had one more person in his corner." Nathan's voice had gone tight, careful in the specific way of someone rehearsing an argument they'd already lost once before. "I've watched what happens to kids who get attached to someone who isn't built to stay. I was one of them." Clara sat down slowly on the step beside him, not touching him, but closer than she would have a week ago. "Your fiancé," she said gently. "Is that what you mean?" Something in him flinched, small and involuntary. "Not exactly, but close enough to the shape of it." "You don't have to tell me." "I know." He looked at her then, and there was something raw underneath his usual composure, something that had been sanded down over years and was only now, in the dark, showing its edges again. "I will. Just not tonight. Tonight I need you to understand something instead." "Okay." "I can't be the man your nephew starts counting on," Nathan said, and it cost him visibly to say it. "Not because I don't want to be. Because I don't trust myself to be someone worth counting on, long-term, and he's already lost one person he built his whole world around. I won't be the second." Clara felt the words land somewhere old and tender, a place she'd been guarding since Daniel's funeral, without fully admitting it. "So, what, you're going to pull away from him? From this?" Her voice had an edge now, protective, unwilling to let him retreat easily. "He's a kid, Nathan. Not an investment you can hedge against." "I know that." "Then act like it. Don't punish him for liking you just because you're scared of what happens after." The words hit harder than she meant them to, and she saw them land, saw something shift behind his eyes. Not anger, something closer to being seen too accurately by someone who hadn't earned the right yet, and resenting it exactly as much as he needed it. "You're right," he said finally, quietly. "I don't have a good answer for that. I just have 22 days and a very bad track record of staying somewhere once things start feeling like they matter." "Then maybe this is the 22 days where you find out if that's actually true, or if it's just the story you've been telling yourself, so you never have to test it." Nathan didn't answer that. He looked back out at the lake instead, jaw tight, and Clara let the silence sit between them, because some silences, she was starting to understand, said more than either of them was ready to say out loud. Upstairs, unnoticed by either of them, Milo lay awake in the dark, listening to the low murmur of two voices through the floorboards, and smiled to himself in a way that had nothing to do with the fish story and everything to do with a feeling he didn't have the words for yet, except that it felt, for the first time in 14 months, like something in the house might actually be able to stay. By the 18th night, they had stopped pretending the work ended when Milo went to bed. 22 days had become 16. The composition had a shape now, a real one, with a bridge that cost Clara something every time she played it and a final movement neither of them had touched yet because both of them seemed to understand, without saying so, that finishing it meant something else was going to end too. Nathan sat beside her on the piano bench, close enough that she could feel the warmth off his arm, correcting a phrase in the margin of her score with a pencil he kept forgetting to put down. "You're doing it again," he said. "Doing what?" "Looking at the keys like they're going to tell on you." He glanced sideways. "Play the ending. The real one. Not the safe one you keep substituting when you get close." Clara's hands hovered over the keys and didn't move. "I don't know the real one yet." "I think you do," he said quietly. "I think you've known it since the boathouse." You're just not sure you're allowed to want it. She turned to look at him then, and the distance between them, which had been shrinking by inches for 18 days without either of them naming it, had finally run out. Is this still about the composition, she said, or are we talking about something else now? I don't know anymore, Nathan admitted. I used to be very good at knowing the difference. Outside, the lake made its small, patient sounds against the dock, the same sound it had made every night since she'd arrived, except tonight it felt like the only thing in the room that wasn't holding its breath. Tell me something true, Clara said. No mentor voice. No precision. Just true. Nathan was quiet long enough that she thought he wouldn't answer at all. When he did, his voice had lost the careful edge she'd gotten used to. I haven't wanted to reach for anything in 4 years, he said. Not like this. I built a whole life around making sure I never had to. And then you walked into a lobby with a foreclosure letter in your coat pocket and a nephew who asks better questions than most adults I know, and every rule I had about myself just stopped applying. That sounds like a problem for you. It is, he said. I'm supposed to be the reason you win this grant, not the reason you can't think straight for the last 2 weeks of it. Maybe I stopped thinking straight before you had anything to do with it. Something shifted in his face, the wall he kept so carefully maintained finally showing a crack wide enough to see through. He reached over, the way he had that first week, correcting a note that didn't need correcting, his hand covering hers on the keys. This time, neither of them pulled away. Clara. Her name in his mouth had stopped sounding like a mentor's formality days ago. If I do what I want to do right now, I don't think either of us gets to pretend tomorrow that this was about the composition. I don't want to pretend that, she said. I'm tired of pretending. He leaned in, slow, deliberate, like a man giving himself every last chance to stop, and for one suspended second, close enough that she could feel his breath, close enough that the whole careful architecture of 30 professional days seemed to hold still and wait, Clara let herself want exactly what she wasn't supposed to want. Then Nathan pulled back.
Hard.
Fast enough that the bench creaked under him. I can't, he said, and it came out rough, like the word had cost him something on the way out. Clara sat very still, her hand cold where his had just been. Okay, she said, careful though it wasn't. Okay. Tell me why. Because the last time I let myself want someone this much, Nathan said, standing, putting the width of the room between them like it might undo what had almost happened. It ended with someone telling me I was guilty by blood, and a wedding that never happened, and 4 years of deciding it was safer to just not. To mentor other people's honesty instead of risking my own. I'm not her, Clara said. Whoever she was. I'm not going to leave because of who your father is. I know that, he said, and his voice broke slightly on it, the most unguarded she'd heard him yet. That's what scares me. I don't have a version of myself who knows what to do with someone who stays. Then maybe that's worth finding out. Not tonight, he said. I have a showcase to get you to, and a very bad habit of ruining good things by wanting them too fast. I won't do that to you. Or to him. She understood, without him saying Milo's name, exactly who him meant. Nathan reached the door and stopped there, his back to her. One hand braced against the frame like it was the only thing holding the last of his composure in place. Love broke me once, he said, so quietly, she almost missed it. I'm not sure I survive it twice. I'm still here, Clara said, to his back, to the closing door, to the empty piano bench beside her. For whatever that's worth to you. He didn't answer. She heard his footsteps on the stairs, slow, then faster. Like a man outrunning something he'd almost let catch him. Clara sat alone at the piano a long while, the unfinished ending still waiting on the page in front of her, and understood, with a clarity that felt almost unbearable, that the composition wasn't the only thing in this house that neither of them had let themselves finish. Upstairs, a light went on and then off again. Somewhere above her, Nathan Cole was awake, staring at a ceiling, losing an argument with himself he'd been having for 4 years. 16 days left. Clara pressed one key, soft, and let the note hang in the empty room until the silence after it said everything the two of them hadn't. Nathan didn't come down for breakfast. Clara found him instead on the boathouse roof deck an hour later, a place she hadn't known existed until Milo mentioned, offhand, that the sad guy stares at the water up there sometimes. She climbed the outside stairs and found him exactly where the boy had said, a mug of coffee gone cold beside him, untouched. "You don't have to explain last night," she said, sitting a careful distance away. "But I think you want to. I think you've wanted to for 4 years and never had anyone ask." Nathan didn't look at her. "Her name was Elise," he said finally. "We were 6 weeks from a wedding when the story about my father broke. Fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, 3 families losing their businesses because he'd buried a bad deal instead of admitting it. My name was in every article right under his." "That's not the same as being guilty. Try telling that to a room full of her parents' friends," he said. "She didn't leave because she thought I'd done anything. She left because she watched what my name did to a room, and she decided she didn't want to spend a marriage apologizing for it." Clara said nothing, letting the silence hold the shape of it. "She told me, right before she gave the ring back, that some things are guilty by blood whether you touch them or not." He finally turned to face her, and his eyes were raw in a way she hadn't seen from him, not even the night before. "I've spent 4 years agreeing with her. It was easier than the alternative." "What's the alternative?" "That she was wrong, and I let her be wrong about me for 4 years because it meant I never had to risk someone doing it again." Clara moved closer, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "So instead you mentor. You stand close enough to other people's honesty and never risk your own. That's what you told me the first week."
"It worked," he said.
"Until you." "What happens now?" "I don't know." He said it plainly, without the armor he usually wrapped around uncertainty. "I know that last night for about 4 seconds, I forgot to be careful. And it terrified me more than anything my father's name has ever done to a room." Below them, Milo's voice carried up from the dock, narrating something to no one in particular, a private game only an 8-year-old could follow. "He doesn't care whose blood you are," Clara said, nodding down at him. "He cares whether you show up. That's the only ledger kids keep." "I know," Nathan said. "That's what scares me most of all, because I think I might actually be able to show up for him."
"For you."
"And I don't trust anything that feels this easy after 4 years of it feeling impossible." "Maybe it's not easy," Clara said. "Maybe it just stopped being a fight, because you finally picked someone worth stopping the fight for." Nathan let out a breath that was almost a laugh, almost something closer to relief. "You make that sound simple." "It's not simple. It's just true. 2 different things, remember?"
"You taught me that."
He looked at her a long moment, something loosening behind his eyes that she hadn't seen since the night at the piano. Not surrender exactly, but the beginning of one. "I requested your file 4 years ago," he said suddenly. "Not this residency. Before that. When I first heard what happened to your brother's studio, I pulled the records myself, trying to find out how much of it traced back to my father. I never told you that." Clara went very still. "What did you find?" "Not enough," he admitted. "The file was incomplete. Pages missing where they shouldn't have been. I always assumed it was my father protecting himself. I'm not so sure anymore." "What changed?" "You did," he said simply. "The more time I spend with you, the less the version of the story I was told adds up. Something's missing, Clara. I think someone wanted your brother to fail, and I don't think it was only my father who benefited from it." The wind off the lake shifted, and for a moment neither of them said anything, the weight of the unfinished sentence settling between them like something neither was ready to lift yet. "Who else was involved?" Clara asked quietly. "I don't know yet," Nathan said. "But I intend to find out. Before the showcase. Before you have to stand in front of investors still believing half a story." He reached over and, for the first time since the night before, took her hand without hesitating, without pulling back, without apologizing for it. "Last night, I told you I wasn't sure I survived loving someone twice," he said. "I've been thinking about it all morning. I don't think that's true anymore. I think I just hadn't met the reason yet." Clara didn't answer with words. She laced her fingers through his instead and let the silence between them say the rest. The same silence Milo had once told him lived between the notes, the place where a song, or a person, finally became honest. 15 days left. And somewhere in a file Nathan hadn't looked at in 4 years, a name neither of them expected was waiting to surface. The email arrived at 9 in the morning, and by 9:15, the program director was asking Clara to come in for a conversation. Clara didn't know the man waiting in the hallway outside the director's office, but he knew her. Mid-50s, expensive coat, the kind of smile that had been practiced in front of enough mirrors to look effortless. "Richard Vance," he said, offering a hand. "I knew your brother. Business circles years back. I was so sorry to hear about Daniel." "I don't think we've met," Clara said carefully. "No reason you would have. I mostly worked with Walter Cole in those days." His eyes flicked, just briefly, toward the office door. "Small world, isn't it? You ending up here, with his son." Before Clara could answer, the director opened the door and asked her in, and Vance stepped back with a smile that didn't reach anywhere near his eyes. "I'll let you get to it," he said. "Good luck at the showcase. I mean that. Truly." Inside, the director slid a folder across the desk, and Clara's stomach dropped before she'd read a single line. "We received documentation this morning," the director said, not unkindly, "regarding your brother's outstanding debts on the studio property. There's a clause in the grant terms about full financial disclosure. This wasn't in your original application." "Because I didn't know it existed," Clara said. "Daniel handled the studio finances. I inherited what was left, not an accounting degree." "I understand. But the foundation board is required to review any undisclosed liabilities before a showcase. It could affect your standing in the program." "Could or will?" The director didn't answer that directly, which was its own answer. Clara found Nathan in the boathouse an hour later, and she didn't bother softening it. "Someone leaked Daniel's old debt filings to the board. Someone who apparently knew your father, and somehow knew exactly which papers would do the most damage 2 weeks before the showcase." Nathan's face went very still. "Describe him." 50s. Expensive coat. Introduced himself like we were already friends. "Richard Vance." Something moved behind Nathan's eyes, recognition, and beneath it, something closer to dread. "Vance was my father's partner on half his deals, including, I'm fairly sure, the one that sank your brother's original financing. You never mentioned him." "Because every file I ever pulled had his name scrubbed to almost nothing. I always read that as my father protecting himself. I think I had it backwards. I think Vance was protecting Vance, and let my father's name take the fall because it was already ruined, and his wasn't. Why target me now? The board could have flagged this the day I applied. Because 2 weeks ago, the studio wasn't worth anything but debt." Nathan was already pulling out his phone, scrolling. Now it's 2 weeks from a foundation showcase, with investors who preserve exactly the kind of property he could flip for 3 times what he'd pay for it in a distressed sale. If you're disqualified or too rattled to finish, the grant money disappears and the property goes back on the market. And he's positioned to buy it. I'd bet everything I have that there's already an offer sitting in a drawer somewhere, waiting for the foreclosure to go through. Clara sat down hard on the piano bench, the folder from the director's office still clutched in one hand. So, he manufactured a crisis to create the exact conditions he needed. "It's what he's good at," Nathan said grimly. "I watched him do it to smaller partners for years and never once put the pieces together because I was too busy being ashamed of my own name to ask whose hand was actually on the wheel." Milo appeared in the doorway just then, backpack over one shoulder, sensing the tension in the room the way children always did before they understood its shape. "Is something wrong?" Clara made herself smile. "Just grown-up paperwork, bud. Go grab your workbook, I'll be right there." When he'd gone, she turned back to Nathan, and the fear underneath her anger finally showed. "If the board pulls my standing before the showcase, there's no grant. There's no saving the studio. There's nothing left to fight with." "Then we get ahead of it," Nathan said. "I still have access to records from my father's old firm. If Vance forged or withheld anything on that original financing deal, there'll be a trail, even if it's buried. I can find it. And if your father was actually part of it? If it's not just Vance." Nathan didn't flinch from the question, which was, Clara thought, The first time she fully believed he meant everything he'd said the past 2 weeks. Then I'll hand you that too. I'm not protecting him anymore, Clara. I'm done being loyal to a name instead of a person. He crossed the room and took both her hands, steadier than she felt, an anchor she hadn't asked for and needed anyway. 15 days isn't a lot of time, but it's enough to find out who actually did this to your family. I promise you that. And if it isn't enough, then we lose the studio fighting for the truth instead of losing it to a lie, Nathan said. But I don't think it's going to come to that. I think Vance made one mistake today. What's that? He let me see his face before he made his move. Men like that only get away with it when no one's looking closely. I'm looking now. Outside, a car Clara didn't recognize pulled slowly away from the gravel road at the end of the property, and neither of them saw it. But far off, through the trees, taillights flared once at the turn, unhurried, patient, already certain of how this was supposed to end. The envelope was waiting on the boathouse doorstep 2 mornings later. No return address, no note. Just a stack of photocopied pages held together with a single binder clip. Clara almost didn't open it. She wished, later, that she hadn't. The first page was a financing agreement dated 4 years back, Bennett Sound Studios' original construction loan, restructured under terms that had ultimately buried Daniel in debt he could never climb out of. And at the bottom, beside a signature she recognized instantly from a dozen town hall photographs over the years, was the name Walter Cole. Not Vance.
Cole.
She found Nathan in the studio, headphones on, deep in the bridge of her composition, and she dropped the pages on the piano in front of him without a word. He went quiet in a way she hadn't seen from him before. Not defensive, just still, the stillness of a man watching a floor give way beneath him in slow motion. Where did you get this? It was left on the doorstep this morning. No note. No name. That should tell you something, Nathan said. Who leaves evidence like this anonymously 2 weeks before a showcase, if not someone who wants exactly this reaction from you? Don't, Clara said, and her voice shook despite herself. Don't turn this into a question about who sent it. Your father's signature is on the paper that ruined my brother. You told me 2 days ago you didn't think it was only Vance. Was that a lie? Did you already know this? No, Nathan stood, and for the first time since the lake house, she watched the wall come back up behind his eyes, fast and total, a man retreating into the only armor he trusted. I told you the truth. I said I didn't know. That's still true. Your own father's signature, Nathan. I can see that, he said, sharper than he meant to, and both of them heard it land. I'm not defending him. I've spent 4 years refusing to defend him. But a signature on a page someone hand-delivered anonymously, timed exactly to blow up 2 weeks before you need the board's trust most. That's not proof, Clara, that's a weapon, and I think you know the difference when you're not this angry. Don't tell me how angry I'm allowed to be. I'm not. He stopped, dragged a hand down his face. I'm telling you that whoever sent this wants you standing exactly where you're standing right now. Doubting me. Doubting the last 3 weeks. It's working. Maybe it's working because it's true. The words hit harder than either of them expected, and Clara watched something close in Nathan's face, quiet and complete. Okay, he said very evenly. Okay. Believe that if that's easier than believing I've spent 3 weeks actually trying to help you. Before Clara could answer, the program director appeared in the doorway, phone still in hand, expression carefully neutral in the way that only meant bad news. I need to speak to both of you, she said. The board received a complaint this morning alleging an undisclosed conflict of interest between mentor and applicant. Given the nature of the allegations, and now this new documentation regarding Mr. Cole's father, the Foundation is recommending you be separated for the remainder of the residency, pending review. Separated, Clara repeated, 12 days before the showcase. I understand the timing is difficult. It's not my decision alone. Nathan's jaw tightened. She needs a mentor to finish this piece. Pulling me now doesn't protect the integrity of the program, it guarantees she fails. That may be a conversation for the appeals process, the director said. For now, I need you to keep professional distance until the board reviews the complaint. Both of you. She left them standing on opposite sides of the piano, the anonymous pages still lying face up between them like a wound neither wanted to touch. "I didn't send that complaint," Nathan said quietly. "I need you to know that, whatever else you believe right now." "I know," Clara said, and hated how small her voice sounded. "I think I know. That's the problem. I don't know anything the way I did 2 days ago." "Then find out," Nathan said. "Not from a page some stranger left on a doorstep. From me. Ask me anything. I have 12 days and nothing left to protect by lying to you." Clara looked at him a long moment, torn between the version of him she'd let herself trust at the piano bench and the name on the page that made trusting him feel like a debt she couldn't afford to owe twice. "I need time," she said finally. "Not distance because the board says so. Time because I don't know how to hold both things at once right now, what I feel and what that signature means." "Okay," Nathan said, and it cost him visibly. "Okay, take it." He gathered the pages from the piano, careful, deliberate, the way he did everything when he was holding himself together by sheer will. "But I'm still going to find out who sent these and why now, whether you're speaking to me or not. Some things don't need permission to be true." He walked out, and this time Clara didn't call after him. Upstairs, Milo stood at the top of the stairs where he'd clearly been listening longer than either adult realized, his small face unreadable in the way children's faces became when they understood more than anyone wanted them to. "Is he leaving?" Milo asked. "I don't know, bud," Clara said, and for the first time in 3 weeks, she didn't have an answer that made it better. 12 days left. And somewhere across town, Richard Vance opened his email to a confirmation that the complaint had been filed and allowed himself, alone in his office, a small, satisfied smile. 12 days became 2, and Clara spent all of them alone with the piece, because the board's order held, and Nathan kept his distance the way she'd asked him to, even when she caught herself wishing, more than once, that he wouldn't. She didn't find out until the morning of the showcase that he'd spent every one of those 12 days somewhere else entirely, in his father's old records, in county filing offices, in a house he hadn't voluntarily walked into in 4 years. The showcase hall filled slowly that evening, investors and board members finding their seats beneath soft gallery lighting, Milo scrubbed and nervous in a borrowed blazer 2 sizes too big, gripping Clara's hand backstage like it was the only steady thing in the room. "You're going to do great," he told her, with a fierce, uncomplicated confidence only an 8-year-old could offer. "I hope so, bud. Dad always said the nervous part means it matters." Clara knelt and hugged him hard enough that he squirmed, because she didn't trust her voice to answer that. She hadn't expected to see Nathan before she walked on stage. She hadn't expected, either, the man standing beside him in the wings, older, gray at the temples, carrying himself like someone who'd spent 4 years practicing how to stand in a room without apologizing for existing in it. "Clara," Nathan said, "this is my father." Walter Cole didn't offer his hand. He looked, instead, like a man bracing for a door to be shut in his face and finding he still deserved it. "I won't take much of your time before you go on," he said. "I needed you to hear this from me directly, not from a page on your doorstep. I never signed the restructuring agreement on your brother's loan. Your signature was on it." "A signature was on it," he said. "Not mine. Richard Vance had access to my signing authority for 11 years before the scandal ended our partnership. He used it on deals I never saw buried under my name because my name was already the one people expected to be guilty. It was efficient for him. I was already ruined. One more bad deal barely moved the needle on my reputation. It moved everything on your brother's." Nathan stepped in, quiet, urgent. "I spent 12 days pulling the county filing records myself. The notarization on that restructuring agreement doesn't match any notary my father's firm used that entire year. It matches a notary Vance used personally, on unrelated deals, 6 separate times. It's forged, Clara. Provably." Clara's chest tightened around something that felt, absurdly, like grief and relief arriving at exactly the same moment.
"Why now?"
"Why tell me 2 minutes before I walk on stage?" "Because Vance is in that audience," Walter said. "I checked the guest list an hour ago. He's sitting with 2 of the foundation's board members, the same board members deciding whether your grant survives tonight. If we wait until after your performance, he has all the time in the world to spin this his way. If we don't, he doesn't. A stagehand appeared at Clara's elbow, murmuring that they were 2 minutes to places, and Clara looked between the two Cole men, the one whose name had haunted for years of her family's ruin, and the one who'd spent every day since the lobby proving, inch by inch, that a name wasn't the same thing as a person. I need you both to say this to the board tonight, she said. On record. Not backstage, where it disappears the second the lights go down. I intend to, Walter said. I've spent 4 years letting my name carry blame. I did, and didn't earn in equal measure. I'd like, for once, to be specific about which is which. Nathan caught her hand as she turned toward the stage entrance, his grip steady in a way that steadied something in her too. Whatever happens with the board tonight, he said, that piece is yours. Nobody forged that. Go play it like it's the only thing in the room that's true, because it is. The lights came up. Clara walked to the piano alone, sat, and found Milo's face in the front row before she found anyone else's, small, fierce, certain, exactly the way he'd looked telling Nathan, weeks ago, that silence was where a song actually lived. Across the room, near the back, Richard Vance shifted in his seat, his easy smile still in place, not yet aware that the two men standing quietly at the edge of the stage were about to take it off him for good. Clara set her hands on the keys, and the room went still around her waiting. Clara played the piece the way Nathan had told her 2 weeks ago, at a piano bench she hadn't known yet would change her life. Not technically perfect, but true. The bridge she'd once rushed to avoid feeling now allowed to sit exactly as long as it needed. She let the silence between the notes do what Milo always said it could. The room leaned into it. Somewhere in the second row, she heard someone crying quietly and didn't dare look up to see who. When the final chord faded, the hall was silent for 1 full second before it broke into applause, and Clara sat there a moment longer, hands still on the keys, letting herself believe it might actually be enough. It wasn't the applause that ended the evening, though. It was what happened after. Walter Cole walked to the small podium at the side of the stage before the board could adjourn, and asked, with a steadiness Nathan hadn't seen from his father in years, for 2 minutes of the room's time. 4 years ago, my name became synonymous with a fraud I only partly committed, he said. Tonight I'd like to correct the part one didn't. Bennett Sound Studios' original financing was restructured under a signature that was not mine, using signing authority I no longer controlled at the time, by a man in this room who let my ruined name absorb the blame for his own deal. He didn't say Vance's name. He didn't have to. Every head in the room turned at once, and Richard Vance's easy smile finally, visibly, cracked. This is absurd, Vance said, rising. Walter, we both know. We both know exactly what we know, Nathan said, stepping forward from the wings, holding up a folder of his own. County notarization records, cross-referenced. I'd be glad to walk the board through them tonight, or you're welcome to explain to them yourself why your notary stamp appears on a loan document neither Walter Cole nor anyone at his firm processed. Vance's mouth opened, then closed. 2 board members near him exchanged a look that ended his evening more completely than anything Nathan or Walter had said. We'll be reviewing this immediately, the foundation director said, already moving. Mr. Vance, I'd ask you to remain, and not to leave the building tonight. It took less than 20 minutes after that for the board to return with a decision. The grant stood, fully funded, the foreclosure proceeding against Bennett Sound Studio formally withdrawn pending the fraud investigation into the original loan. Clara heard the word awarded and had to sit down on the piano bench again because her legs had stopped being reliable. Milo reached her first, colliding into her so hard she nearly toppled off the bench, and she held on to him and let herself finally cry for Daniel, for the studio, for 14 months of carrying something alone that she didn't have to carry alone anymore. She found Nathan afterward on the same rooftop deck where he'd once told her about Elise, the party noise faint below them, the night finally quiet enough to hold what neither of them had said yet. You didn't have to bring your father into that room, she said. It cost you something doing that in public. It cost me less than losing you would have, Nathan said. I spent 4 years deciding that being careful was the same as being safe. Watching you walk on that stage tonight, not knowing if I'd already lost you before you even sat down. I don't want to be careful anymore, Clara. I'm tired of it. I'm sorry I doubted you, she said. The signature. You had every right to doubt a Cole standing in the middle of it, he said. I'm not asking you to apologize for that. I'm asking you what happens now, when there's no grant deadline left to hide behind, and no reason for either of us to pretend this was ever just about a composition. Clara stepped closer, close enough that the space between them finally stopped feeling like something either of them was managing. You told me, once you didn't trust yourself to stay, she said, that you kept pushing people away before they could prove you right. I remember. Then don't push, she said. Just stay. Nathan didn't answer with words this time. He closed the distance instead, slow and certain, nothing like the near kiss he'd pulled back from weeks before, no hesitation left in it, no argument he was losing to himself, just the two of them finally choosing the same thing at the same moment, the silence between them saying, at last, everything it had been holding all along. Below them, through the tall windows of the hall, Milo stood watching the two shapes on the rooftop, and though he couldn't hear a single word from that distance, he didn't need to. He turned back to the room, found Diane refilling her water glass by the piano, and announced, with the flat, satisfied certainty of an 8-year-old who has just been proven right about something important, that he was probably going to have a new almost dad by Christmas. 3 months later, Bennett Sound Studio reopened under a new sign that still bore Daniel's name, with one addition beneath it in smaller letters, a dedication to the person who'd once told his aunt that a good melody needs one thing nobody talks about. On opening night, Clara played the piece one more time, the same bridge, the same silence, Nathan beside her on the bench correcting nothing at all, and Milo asleep against Diane's shoulder in the front row before the final note had even finished settling into the room. Some silences, Clara had learned, weren't empty at all. They were just where everything true was finally allowed to live.